As people continue to join, allow me to begin by welcoming everyone to this evening's webinar entitled Pilgrimage to Justice, Walking the Path of Nonviolence with Dr. Ken Butigan. My name is Jim Earls, and I am the program coordinator at Shalom Spirituality Center in Dubuque, Iowa. I have the privilege of introducing this webinar on behalf of the Tri-State Network, a coalition of Catholic women religious and spirituality centers from Illinois, Iowa, and Wisconsin who focus on peace, justice, and spirituality. The Tri-State Network includes Bennett House Retreat Center, the Dominican Sisters of Sinsinawa, Franciscan Peace Center, Marywood Franciscan Spirituality Center, Our Lady of the Prairie Retreat Center, Prairie Woods Franciscan Spirituality Center, Shalom Spirituality Center, Sisters of Charity of the Blessed Virgin Mary, and the Sisters of St. Francis, Dubuque. Right now, there is a convergence of special events. September 1st was the start of the yearly Season of Creation, which lasts until the feast day of St. Francis on October 4th. This year marks the 800th anniversary of St. Francis of Assisi's Canticle of Creation, as well as the 10th anniversary of Pope Francis's groundbreaking encyclical Laudato Si, and it also happens to be the Jubilee Year of Hope, which was proclaimed by Pope Francis and encouraged by Pope Leo XIV. During this Jubilee year, we are invited to make a pilgrimage, a journey to a sacred or special place that can be physical or spiritual. This is meant to be a time for personal renewal, growth, and grace. Tonight's webinar is being held as a part of the Pilgrimages of Hope for Creation, a nationwide initiative calling people to renew their relationship with God, one another, and creation through prayerful action. Before I introduce Dr. Butigan and invite him to begin his presentation, let me say just a few words about the structure of this evening's webinar. Following the actual presentation, there will be time reserved for questions and answers. If a question or a comment occurs to you during the presentation, feel free to type it into the chat window or save it to voice out loud during the Q&A period if you would prefer. But until that time, we would ask everyone to please remain with your microphones muted so as to not distract during the presentation. Following the Q&A period, representatives from the Tri-State Network will briefly draw attention to local pilgrimage opportunities in the Tri-State area. Please note that this entire webinar is being recorded, and the complete recording will be shared with all who have registered. Let us begin this evening with an opening prayer. For that, I turn things over to Sister Nancy Miller of the Dubuque Sisters of St. Francis.
Thank you, Jim, and welcome everyone. For our prayer this evening, I invite you to pause for a moment and simply take a deep breath. We begin our prayer hearing from Pope Leo's letter of the World Day of Prayer for the Care of Creation entitled Seeds of Peace and Hope. In Christ, we are seeds of peace and hope. The earth is God's gift and handiwork. Living our vocation to be protectors of God's handiwork is essential to a life of virtue. By working with love and perseverance, we can sow many seeds of justice and thus contribute to the growth of peace with renewal of hope. So let us pause to listen and soak in some sounds of God's holy creatures chanting praise in the holy darkness of night. And now, a message from Sister Mother Earth.
The earth speaks. I love you, and my tears flow in gratitude to water the fields which grow the grain, which feed you, my people. I hurt, and my tears are carried by the wind to cleanse, but sometimes destroy, because you did not listen to my needs. I breathe the air to give you life, to cool you, to carry the seeds of new life. But I am heavy now with particles I do not wish to carry. Free me. With passion I share energy, fire, to warm you, to transform, to feed you, to light the way. I run wild sometimes, trying to escape the confines, the hurt you have caused as you cut and burn and build where I want to be free. Hold me in the embrace of your care, of your understanding and cooperation. I am your mother.
Yes,
Love
I
you.
know. I'm trying to get the sound to work.
Thank you, Sister Nancy and Sister Kathleen, for that beautiful prayer and reflection. Now then, let me introduce our presenter. Dr. Ken Butigan is a longtime changemaker who has organized a series of social movements and campaigns for justice and peace, focused on resisting war, promoting justice for the unhoused, and advocating the abolition of nuclear weapons. He has led many pilgrimages to Assisi and Rome in the footsteps of Saints Francis and Clare of Assisi. He is a senior consultant with Pace Bene Nonviolence Service, where he co-founded Campaign Nonviolence, working for a nonviolent culture free from war, poverty, racism, and environmental destruction. He recently retired from DePaul University in Chicago, where for 20 years he taught courses on pilgrimage, peace, justice, and nonviolence. He is also a senior advisor to Pax Christi International's Catholic Nonviolence Initiative and the Catholic Institute for Nonviolence. Reflecting on this initiative, Dr. Butigan shares, in Laudato Si, Pope Francis reminds us that the cries of the earth and the cries of the poor are intertwined. These pilgrimages invite us to return to a right relationship with creation and each other. With no further ado, I welcome Dr. Butigan to offer us his presentation.
Well, thank you so much, Jim, and the entire Tri-State Network. I have a long relationship with the Franciscan Sisters of Clinton, Iowa, and I'm so happy some of us are here in this circle today. And of course, as I was saying at some point, on September 15th marks my 35th year with Pace Bene. So I've been surrounded in good ways by Franciscan women and men for these 3.5 decades. I am so grateful to be with you. It is so critical what you are doing. It is so important that you are embarking on pilgrimages of ecological nonviolence and transformation and healing. And as I was thinking about our time together, I thought, what kinds of pilgrimages for justice have I been privileged to be part of? And I thought I would start by just sharing one example. So in the 1980s, way back in the last millennium, I spent about 10 years working with many people across this country trying to end U.S. wars in Central America, the war on the poor of El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. And I was the national coordinator of a group called the Pledge of Resistance. And 3 of those years I spent in Washington, D.C. And one day I got a phone call saying that a village in El Salvador had been bombed. And a Jesuit had called me to say, can you join this delegation that we're putting together? Because they're not allowing, the government is not allowing the church, the press, human rights organizations, or anybody else to go in to see what had happened with this carnage. And it was important. This was a critical moment when the US was actually seeing the effects of nonviolent action across the country and was considering ending its support for death squad government in El Salvador. So I agreed to be part of that delegation. We flew to San Salvador. Normally takes about 2 hours to get to this place where the bombing had happened. We spent 2 days driving from military roadblock to military roadblock, and we finally arrived at a place where the soldiers told us, you're not going any further. You're not going any further because it's a conflictive zone in there. You're not allowed. So with nonviolence, as some of us know, we have options. One is we could have just said, there's nothing we can do, go back to the airport, fly back to the United States. We could have maybe used some sort of violence, but that would have been incredibly insane. We could have done many other things, but what we decided to do was to sit there and just see what would happen. And after about an hour, the soldiers relaxed, we were just there relaxing. And all of a sudden, this truck covered with women and children came down the road on the other side of the military roadblock. And this woman gets on a PA system, maybe from the 1920s, and says, translated from Spanish, welcome. How wonderful you are here. How wonderful international solidarity is. We've come to show you the life that we're living under the bombs. We've come to take you to our village. At which point the soldiers shot up. They got their guns. They were pointing it in every direction. You're not going anywhere. So again, we could have just left, but we sat down and just see what happens. Let's just see what happens on this pilgrimage that we were on. After about another hour, everybody was pretty relaxed. These little girls got off the truck and they went right up to the soldiers and then went right through them. And this little girl comes up to me and she puts her hand out and says in Spanish, come, I want to take you to see my village. And I, in my mind, am going, you're nuts. Those people have guns over there and they don't want us to go to your village. But she put her hand out. And I still don't understand it, but I found my hand going into her hand. And she very carefully took me up to the soldiers. The one soldier put his hand on my chest and said, you're not going anywhere. But there's something that happened between our eyes. And I could see he wondered whether he should try to stop us or not. And I finally said, in the worst Spanish that I have, I'm sorry, I've got to go. And the little girl led me through the soldiers. There were about 25 of us, including Bishop Thomas Gumbleton, who were there. 8 of us managed to get through, and we just kept walking. Finally, there was a bend in the road, and we all looked at each other and said, now what? We were just convinced the government's going to send a truck. They're going to put the gringos, the Americans on the truck, deport them, and who knows what will happen to these women and children. And then predictably, a truck came around the corner. A guy jumped out and says, "Hi, I work for the local bishop. You need a ride?" And we said, "Yeah, we need a ride." So we all jumped on this truck just as the sun was going. It's like a weird Hollywood movie. And as we're going into the countryside, we get up to the village, and then they say, "We're going to show you where the attack took place." They took us to a corn mill where a father and 3 children under attack had jumped into the corn mill thinking they would be safe there. And unfortunately, they weren't. And in fact, they were killed in that attack. So they took us to that corn mill and said, "Now we are going to pray." It was one of the deepest experience of prayer I've ever had. We were lamenting what had happened. We were lamenting that my government was behind this. We were lamenting the loss of this father and his children. And then they looked us straight in the eye and said, "And now we're going to party." They took us to one of the main buildings in the village. They brought out guitars, they brought out food, they started singing all these amazing songs about their life before the war, then being driven off their land into a refugee camp in Honduras, then getting up the gumption to convince the UN to accompany them back to their village. Then a song about the attack, and then this song about these strange Americans that had arrived out of the middle of nowhere. They made up this song immediately. The next day, they took us around and they showed us where the attack happened, and there was a huge amount of shrapnel in the field, and there was a box. It said Springfield, Missouri on it, and that is one of the arsenals of the United States Army. And apparently, they'd kicked it out of a helicopter after this. They'd used up all the ammunition. Then they called together the whole community from people all over the various hills and celebrated Mass. And we were able to confess our sins, the sins of this war, but also to be able to share that people all across the United States, in places like Clinton and Dubuque and all these places that you're from, we're actually working to end this injustice and this violence. And when we came back to the United States, we were able to take that wooden box and form it into a cross and go to every congressional office in the Capitol in Washington and explain what we had seen and heard. And several months later, the US government cut off aid to El Salvador. It wasn't just because of what we did, but because there was a movement and because there was the courage of that little girl. So tonight we're reflecting on what is a pilgrimage of justice. It was probably my first experience of pilgrimage in the deepest sense, to go on that particular journey, to somehow find myself with these amazing people and that little girl. We have so much ahead, friends. We are so lamenting what's happening with the earth and the need to create that healing or be part of creating that healing of our common home, as Pope Francis said, and as Pope Leo is continuing to urge us in our Catholic faith to witness for and even to go on those pilgrimages of justice. So in light of that, I'd like to share a 2-minute beginning of a video that's called "On the Road with Thomas Merton." And in this little video, Merton is also talking about a sacred journey. And just as we begin our time together, I just invite us again as following on the prayer that was shared earlier from the earth. We have this possibility of reflecting and centering ourselves for this exploration of pilgrimage, justice, nonviolence, and care for the earth.
Abandoning ourselves to the guidance of God, to the will of God. See, this idea, this metaphor of the journey is very important in the spiritual tradition of monasticism. This idea of abandoning yourself to God and going off where God leads you. It's not just the idea of a journey just for the sake of covering ground. See, it's a journey as symbolic of man's state on earth. We're all on a journey. See, we're all going somewhere.
The geographical pilgrimage is the symbolic acting out of an inner journey. Every moment and every event of every person's life on earth plants something in their soul. But I do have a past to break with, an accumulation of inertia, waste, wrong, foolishness, rot, junk, a great need of clarification of mindfulness, or rather, of no mind, a return to genuine practice, right effort, need to push on to the great doubt, need for the spirit, hang on to the clear light.
Well, as our brother Thomas Merton is suggesting, and he says this more clearly at the end of that video, and I will be giving your facilitators access to both PowerPoint that I'm going to be using, but also that video and some other videos. But Merton is he's saying we're going from, in a sense, the known to the unknown. We think we're going to the known. We think God is calling us to the known. We're in the known. We know that the earth is facing such a catastrophe. And we're being called to the unknown. The transformation, the healing, the nonviolent change, the shift that's going to be necessary to see the healing of the earth. We don't know how that's going to happen. It's mystery. It's the unknown. But the fact that we're all in this circle tonight and bringing our many years of wisdom, because I know all of you have stores of wisdom that is going to be critical to that transformation, is a journey into the unknown. So tonight, I'm inviting us to think that, yes, it's nonviolent action, but this nonviolent action is a spiritual process. It's a pilgrimage in its deepest sense. And we are all pilgrims on the way, and we can learn from one another that process. So in light of that, I'm going to put up my my PowerPoint now and begin to reflect on that. So here we go. So here's my very basic definition of pilgrimage. Broad. Pilgrimage is a meaningful journey to a significant destination and back. Sometimes we think of it only in terms of certain religious sites or other things, but I invite us to try on this description. It's a meaningful journey to a significant destination and back. Here's a little more background on where does the word pilgrimage come from. So the word pilgrim comes from the Latin pellegrinus, which literally means stateless persons. What an interesting idea. We're leaving the known state we're in, and we're going, and in a way, by going, we become stateless. When you think of so many of our friends, our sisters and brothers from Mexico, from throughout Latin America, and so forth, who are being rounded up now because this government decides they're stateless or they're going into a stateless situation. Pilgrimage itself comes from peregrinatio, going forth into strange countries. So it's a really interesting way of thinking about that. The pilgrim is a stateless person, and pilgrimage is this process of going into strange countries. And we'll talk a little more about what that means to go from the familiar to the unfamiliar. A couple of other ways of thinking about pilgrimage. It's a round trip journey undertaken by a person who considers their destination sacred. A religiously motivated journey to a shrine, conceptualized as an especially holy place. And a ritual journey of transformation. All of those, I think, have a lot of meaning and power for us if we reflect on them. And again, you'll get this PowerPoint if that's helpful. But the last one I invite us to think about, it's a ritual, it's a journey, but it's a kind of a ritual journey of transformation. This is what we can engage with the tri-state pilgrimages that are coming up, and the pilgrimage our society and our world is on, and maybe our religious communities are on, and our church is on. And so how do we ritualize that as a journey? How are our lives themselves a ritual journey of transformation? Merton says, the sacred journey has origins in prehistoric religious cultures and myths. The human person instinctively regards herself as a wanderer and wayfarer, and it is second nature for her to go on pilgrimage in search of a privileged and holy place, a center and source of indefectible life. When I was still teaching, I would share this quotation with my students, and I'd ask, what is indefectible life? What is life without a defect? What is life, capital L? That sense of wholeness. We all want that wholeness, that life without defect, that life shared with one another, that privileged and holy place, a center and source of indefectible life. Over the millennia, this search for the center and source has led pilgrims to leave what is familiar, to enter the unfamiliar, urged on by a call that is often deeply personal, but also deeply universal. And this call can take many forms. And again, in light of the theme that's been chosen for tonight, and really the call from the earth, we heard the prayer from the earth, the yearning from the earth at the beginning of our time together tonight. We are all being called into the unfamiliar. We do not know the answers. And yet there is something about the wisdom tradition we're part of, and the wisdom tradition we are creating together, all of us in this circle and all of our communities and the entire church and the entire world, that can help us if we go into that unknown. Something will come of that. That's been my experience in life. Okay, So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. There is a little interactive thing here. So I'm going to ask you either with a piece of paper or your laptop or your phone or just in your mind, take a moment and think over your life. And if you can, please call to mind 5 journeys that you took, nobody else took, that you took, that were significant for you. We're going to take 1 minute, and I just invite you to just think back. What were the ones that really struck you, that were significant for you? So if we're open to doing this, and again, at whatever level you feel comfortable, you don't want to do this, that's fine. But if you can, that would be tremendous. Just take a moment. Think about, try to identify 5 journeys you've taken in your life. Could have been across town, could have been around the world. And I'll call you back in 1 minute. Let's take maybe 20 more seconds. So if we can begin to come back to the large group here, I'm going to ask you to choose the top one. Just try to identify one that really, really spoke to you the most, maybe. And once you've done that, I'm going to ask you to go to the chat, which you can see the little icon down at the bottom of your screen, probably. And if you could share at whatever level you feel comfortable, you don't want to do this, this is fine, why that journey was significant to you. Like for just a few words. I met my best friend. That was the most courageous thing I ever did. I finally left home. Or whatever it is, just something kind of brief that captures why that journey was significant. You don't have to put your name on it. And I'm going to get out of the my PowerPoint for a moment. And so if you feel comfortable putting just a few words about why that journey, that top journey mattered to you. We'll take another 20 seconds or so. And for those of you who've put yours up, go ahead and scroll through the chat and just like marinate in what was shared. So I'm going to call us back to the large group. So, wow. I'm very moved by what I'm reading here about all of it. I don't even want to read them aloud because that I'll leave some out. But really just enjoy and listen and be moved by these experiences. And this is not me telling you a story. These are your own most important things. All of these are amazing. And they all, as far as I can tell, they talk about life, turns in life. They talk about transformation. They talk about aha moments. They talk about being alone and being with others. And so critically important. So thank you for that. We could end it right here. We could just spend the rest of the time unpacking with one another the meaning of this. And in fact, I do encourage us because in a short amount of time, you put up things that are extremely important to you. And I'm very, 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 very grateful for that. So I'm going to go back to my PowerPoint now. But thank you for that and what it can teach us about our own experience, but also the journeys that have been significant with meaningful destinations, but also return. You came back and now you're integrating it, or you did integrate it into your life like that. All right. All right. So you have just actually shown why people go on pilgrimage. Here are some others to think about. To answer an inner call, to experience a miracle, to achieve pardon, to give thanks, to experience a place of power, to reclaim lost or forgotten parts of ourselves, to get outside the normal routine of life so something new can happen, and to seek meaning. And there are probably 1.2 million other reasons people go on pilgrimage. But as I was putting this together, because I've always thought about this in terms of an inner personal experience, but think about what we have to do to care for the common home, planet Earth. How we need to answer an inner call that the Earth is giving us. And we heard the Earth earlier sending us that call. We want a miracle to heal the Earth. We need to achieve pardon for what we've done to damage the Earth. To give thanks for Mother Earth. To experience a place of power. This planet is throbbing with power, and we get to experience it. And so forth. Getting outside the normal routine and seeking meaning. So everything I'm saying here applies personally and interpersonally. It's like what Merton's saying, that the geographical pilgrimage is also symbolic of the interior, but also the interior is symbolic of the geographical, because we need geographical nonviolence. We need to do what so many of your communities are showing us we need to do, that kind of healing and that kind of transformation. All right, so I know that there are more here than people in the Sisters of St. Francis of Clinton community, but I first met the Sisters of St. Francis of Clinton 30 some years ago, and it was on pilgrimage. And the pilgrimage was to, of all places, the Nevada test site in Nevada, 2 hours north of Las Vegas. And we all were about praying for an end to nuclear testing. And as you may know, a nuclear bomb was detonated in Nevada, in the United States, on average once every 18 days from 1951, when President Harry Truman essentially stole the land from the Western Shoshone people and built a 1,350 square mile nuclear test site. And every 18 days, a nuclear bomb was going off. And Franciscans, on the 800th anniversary of St. Francis's birth, went out there, just a handful, and prayed. And then others followed, and others followed, and some of you followed. What an amazing thing. And as part of that, when we met, I was asked to be part of a nonviolence training, because you need some nonviolence to go up against some of the greatest violence in the planet. And we've been on a pilgrimage ever since. And I just thought, for fun, I would share some images from over the years from that experience. So the Nevada test site, this was Pauline and Anne. Pauline, a member of the Western Shoshone people, and Anne, who was one of the organizers at the Nevada test site and Nevada Desert Experience, which was organizing those actions. Indeed, it's the most bombed place on the planet. And there are parts of it we cannot go into for 10,000 years because of the radiation that's there. But that didn't stop people from going and witnessing, as this group did. They were on a pilgrimage of peace, of justice, of nonviolence. Here's Sister Clarita, born in Poland, emigrated to Las Vegas to work with the poor and the marginalized, and she went up to engage in nonviolent civil disobedience as part of her pilgrimage at the test site. She's doing what you should never do to a sheriff. She's grabbing his arm. It's almost like she's the kindergarten teacher saying, "We got to clean this mess up." And look at that smile on her face, and that really interesting look on his face. And and there's a baby picture of me all those years ago. And I wrote a book about it called Pilgrimage Through a Burning World: Spiritual Practice and Nonviolent Protests at the Nevada test site. But here's the kicker. Not only was that important witness, that pilgrimage to justice, a beautiful spiritual experience, it contributed mightily, as I try to show in this book, to the people power movement globally, because people came from all over the world to be part of this, that created the conditions to get to an actual comprehensive test ban treaty in 1993 that 154 nations have signed. And we do not have a nuclear bomb being tested every 18 days anymore. And that came out of a call from God, a call from St. Francis, and the call inside of each of you who have been part of those movements. So, very briefly, we think about classic pilgrimages: Jerusalem, Mecca, Rome, the Ganges, Machu Picchu, Lourdes, Assisi, Camino de Santiago de Compostela. And those are really important. But there are many types of pilgrimage: spiritual and religious, cultural, like going to the Vietnam Wall in Washington, D.C., popular culture, like going to Disneyland, nature, like going to the Grand Canyon, personal pilgrimages, and what we're kind of focusing on tonight is the social change pilgrimages. What helps that pilgrimage, not just ourselves, but our society to go on a pilgrimage? Those Franciscans going out to the Nevada test site were inviting society to go on a pilgrimage. And it responded by saying, yes, we actually are going to create change in this way. But there are also these, what I would call nonviolence pilgrimages. So you have Gandhi's Salt March to the sea for Indian independence in 1930. He actually called it a pilgrimage, and that was very deep in the Hindu tradition that he was drawing on. Dr. King and many others marching from Selma to Montgomery, a pilgrimage in 1965 to demand voting rights for African Americans. Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta's pilgrimage from Delano, where they organized in the Central Valley in California, to the capital at Sacramento in 1966. They literally called it a pilgrimage led by Our Lady of Guadalupe. And then many national marches and actions in Washington, D.C. And I'm calling it nonviolence because these are great examples of nonviolence. So very briefly, gospel nonviolence is, to use Pope Leo's most used phrase since he became Pope in May, gospel nonviolence is an unarmed and disarming spirituality, way of life, method for change, and universal ethic that does what? It refuses to harm others. It strives to transform and resolve conflict. It willingly faces the consequences for taking that stance in a violent world. Nonviolence rejects, repents, and resists violence while putting the constructive power of universal love in action, nurturing peace, justice, reconciliation, unity, and the well-being of all. It is the great pilgrimage, the shift that actually has to happen on this planet from systems of domination and violence to the nonviolent future. And guess what? You're all on that pilgrimage. And I'm so grateful for that. Pope Leo says, in a divided and troubled world, the Holy Spirit teaches us to walk together in unity, to go on a pilgrimage. The earth will rest, justice will prevail, the poor will rejoice, and peace, which we so need, will return once we no longer act as predators, but as pilgrims. Ah, this teacher is saying, give up that predator thing. We're going to be pilgrims for peace, justice, and nonviolence. Okay, so in a moment, in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to consider going on a pilgrimage, go on these tri-state pilgrimages, and you can even consider your own pilgrimage. So what's going to be helpful for that, because you're going to get this PowerPoint, is understanding what the stages of a pilgrimage are. And I've studied this a lot, and I've gone on a lot of pilgrimages, and this is where I've come out so far. I see 8 stages of a pilgrimage. The first is the longing. I gotta go. The second is the call. I'm going to go someplace specific. Somebody's going to call me up and I'm going to go with them, or I'm going to read something, or I'm going to respond to a call to go on this significant journey. Then there's preparation. You're getting it tonight. We got some at the Nevada test site 30 some years ago. It's the preparation, spiritual and logistical, for a pilgrimage. Then there's the departure. You know that thing where you're about to close your front door, you kind of one foot still in your house and one foot headed out. That's the threshold. That's the what they call the betwixt and between, the in between, the liminal space. And you're saying goodbye to the old and hello to the new. Even if the old is something you've known forever or you live there, you're letting go of that. That's the departure stage. And then there's the journey itself. And this is my favorite, arrival at the center. And the thing about the arrival at the center is we think we know why we're going on this journey. We think we know why we're going on this pilgrimage. And sometimes it works out that way. But usually our destination is what? Not the center. Something happens. We meet somebody. We come to an insight. We feel transformed by some kind of experience that you hadn't planned for. It's that unknown that Thomas Merton is talking about and that God is calling us to. And I don't think we're going to get to real care for the planet until we enter that unknown, and we can't do it by ourselves. If we try to change the world by ourselves, we'll be destroyed by it. We need each other. We need other cranky, beautiful, resilient people arriving at the center and then returning with what you've learned out of this wisdom tradition of a pilgrimage. And then once we return, then we integrate this experience into our own lives. So the longing, the call, the preparation, the departure, the journey, the arrival at the center, the return, and integrating that experience into our life. Well, we haven't heard about the tri-state pilgrimages yet, but I will, and again, I'm going to make sure if you want it, you can get this PowerPoint, you can look at it. But I do ask you, when you hear about these pilgrimages, what is this journey really about? What is the meaning of this journey? What is the impact of this journey on our own souls, on those people we met, on those people we don't like very much that we might meet along the way, on our society? How does this fit into the larger journey of your life, these pilgrimages that are being organized, and the life of our society? Our society is on a very strange pilgrimage right now, very difficult, very challenging. We're headed into the unknown in a lot of ways. How does what you're going to learn and experience, or what you're going to bring to it, how does that fit into the life of our society? And what is it teaching us to do? How does this creative action renew our relationship with God, with one another, and with creation? And how can it be a spiritual call to care for our common home and a sacred path toward ecological justice and nonviolence? These are questions that your facilitators have and organizers have posed, and I pose them at the beginning, but they're really for each of us. How is this a spiritual call? And what is it going to take us to that we don't really even understand yet? Okay, so here's the thing I'm going to ask you to think about doing. I've done this, I've taught this course on pilgrimage at DePaul University many times, and I also have taken students to Assisi out of a class like that through study abroad at DePaul in Chicago. But nobody goes on any of those things if they don't go on a kind of a tune-up pilgrimage. So this is what I ask my students to do. I ask them to think about a place that's not too far away. I don't want them to spend a lot of money, but find a place that's significant to you, and go on a journey, and maybe use those 8 stages of a pilgrimage to think about that journey. What's the longing? What's the call? What's the preparation? What's the departure? What's the journey itself? What is the arrival at the center that you hadn't expected? Had nothing to do with getting a grade in a class. And then the return, and then how do you integrate it into your life? So you don't have to do this, of course, but you might want to think about this. Is there a place within 100 miles, 50 miles, 10 miles, 1 mile that's significant for you, not for somebody else, but for you? Could be halfway around the world or someplace nearby. And set some time aside and go on the pilgrimage. And then if you get a chance to write a little pilgrimage account of it. What was that longing? What was that call that I got from that person who said, let's drive up to Minnesota or whatever? I had a student one time. I've had many students do amazing things. One student couldn't think of any place to go, but was going to a wedding in, of all places, Iowa, and said, I can't think of anything really significant. I'm just going to go to this wedding, and that'll be my pilgrimage, with a kind of ho-hum, rolling the eyes kind of thing. There was a tornado that hit where the wedding was happening. And it took like 6 days to get back to Chicago. And that was the pilgrimage that this person had. But there are so many. People have gone to the grave sites of relatives that they had unfinished business with. I had a student who was a film student who went to the place Hollywood really started in Chicago, at a film studio that's now just got a little plaque on it. I had a student who grew up on a farm in southern Michigan and said, I'm going to go visit that. Came back and said, oh my gosh, I'm supposed to be a farmer. And many, many other things. So sometimes amazing things can happen. All right. So in a moment, we're going to have questions. We're going to have all sorts of things. But I would like you to take a moment, if you would, and think about over the last, whatever it's been, 40 some minutes, what is one takeaway for you for our time, from our time together? Take a minute and reflect back on all these different things. I told that story about El Salvador. We saw that little clip from Merton. We thought about this one very bald definition, that it's this meaningful journey to a significant destination and the return or coming back. We looked at various aspects. We thought about the classic pilgrimages and then all these other kinds of pilgrimages. And really why I'm asking you even to think about maybe going on a personal pilgrimage is helps us break out of the idea that it means you have to go to Assisi or you have to go to the Ganges. No, we've been on all kinds of pilgrimages in our life, and the power that that ritual of transformation can have. So I've been talking a lot. I would just invite us, let's take a minute on your wherever you want to do it. And if you're willing, at whatever level you feel comfortable, you can also put that in the chat as well. What's a takeaway from this reflection that we've had so far? Well, thank you everyone for that. And I'm really appreciating that we had opened this space and that some of you have much history of nonviolent witness and action and transformation and healing in lots of parts of our lives. And for this, I'm deeply grateful, and I will turn this back to our facilitators.
All right, well, thank you so much for an excellent presentation, very thought-provoking, Dr. Butigan. At this point, as we move into Q&A, we will invite people, if you would prefer, to just type a question into the chat. Please feel free to do so. Or else you can use the React tab down at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand, and we will recognize one at a time if you prefer to voice it out loud.
One question that is raised is how can we integrate our experience into our lives and society? Do you want to offer kind of some, just really say practical suggestions or
Yes. Thanks, Nancy. I would say this. I don't know about you, but I've led a very mobile life. I've traveled a lot in lots of places. And, 100 years ago, people didn't necessarily do that. I remember hearing this story on NPR one time where this woman who was 90 years old who lived in Kansas said, I didn't travel. I never saw an ocean. I thought, well, yeah, that's kind of amazing that you could not see an ocean. But then she said, and I never saw a mountain. And I thought, wow, unlike that person, I've been able to go all around the world, all across this country, and so forth. But the problem is, if I don't take time to reflect on that journey, it just goes down the memory hole, as George Orwell would say. So reflection, as I often say in nonviolence training, there's nonviolent action, and then there's reflection on the nonviolent action, which is another nonviolent action. So it's a nonviolent action to reflect on nonviolent action. Similarly, reflecting on whatever journey it is, going to the grocery store or going to Machu Picchu. There is meaning in there, but it has to be tapped. So I ask my students to write a pilgrimage account once they've gone on what we're calling a pilgrimage. And often so many more insights come out of that. And then the question is, in what ways have I changed because of this journey that I took, even to the grocery store, perhaps? How have I changed? Because if the pilgrimage doesn't change us in some way, not really a pilgrimage. It's a ritual journey of transformation. There's no transformation. So our job is to kind of ferret out, how have I changed? Or how can I change based on what I learned? So I took 7 groups of students to Assisi in Rome. I was very privileged to be able to do that. And you do 10 weeks preparation. And we did this whole 8 stages of a pilgrimage. And everybody's like, what's going to be my arrival at the center? Going to see the Colosseum, going to St. Peter's, etc., going to St. Francis's tomb. Most of the time, it's not that. So on the last night before I left, one student tugged my arm and said, I think I know what my arrival at the center is. I said, what's that? I'm a control freak. And I realized on this journey that I'm a control freak. And that was such an insight. And that is the takeaway. That is the arrival that I made. And then she burst into tears. I was hoping it was something like going to St. Peter's, but it was coming to that insight. So I would just say, however you reflect on your experience, writing, making a video, talking with somebody else, but then how do we crystallize what we learned and because that was now the journey. The next step for that person was, okay, if I'm a control freak, what do I need to do about it?
We do have a question. How can I use pilgrimage to deepen my faith in times of struggle?
It may be the best thing for us to reflect on ever. So if a pilgrimage is a meaningful journey to a significant destination and the return, Jesus was on a pilgrimage. He finally set his face toward Jerusalem, and nothing was going to stop him from that. Even those disciples who had gone out preaching and then found out that the Samaritans didn't like them and said to Jesus, can we just send down a hellfire on them because they rejected you and your message? And he rebukes the disciples. And he doesn't want to spend any time even thinking about something that's so against the gospel. And he heads toward Jerusalem. And then he says, when he gets to Jerusalem, if you only knew what are the things that make for peace. So Jesus was headed into the big unknown. And Jesus is calling us, I think, the Holy Spirit is calling us in this time into the unknown. Not to say we're going to get all the answers, but that this is a time of struggle and challenge. I think it's good on pilgrimage most of the time to go with somebody else. So we're not just carrying that alone. Although the personal pilgrimage, I think there's a lot of benefit in that as well. So each of us is going to have to answer this really, really important question. This is, I think this is, when I say pilgrimage, it's not just narrowly religious, it's not just cultural, and it's not just psychological. It's also deeply spiritual. So I think if we had a whole weekend or whatever, or a week to reflect on this together, we would unpack all the ways you've been doing this. And there'd be a great deal of consolation in that. For that, I'm grateful. Thanks.
Along with that, there's another question for those who may not be able to take a traditional pilgrimage. What practices can still help them enter into the spirit of pilgrimage for nonviolence? You maybe more specifically enter into a spirit of pilgrimage for nonviolence and practices that might be helpful.
So many ways we could approach that. You know, in the 14th century, a lot of people couldn't get up and go to Jerusalem, which was the par excellence pilgrimage site. So some writers put together a book that it's as if you were in Jerusalem going on the way of the cross. This was in the 14th century. And the various guides like this were created. So you really didn't have to leave your rectory or convent or your home. You could go on a pilgrimage. And now we have the internet. You can go on pilgrimage. In fact, by the end, I want to share some, just for fun. If you've seen this already, great. But if you haven't, PBS created a series called Sacred Journeys, and they are amazing pilgrimage accounts, like an hour long each one, to Lourdes, Mecca, Jerusalem, India, and so forth. Really, really great. But you're asking an even deeper question than, you can't join the big group going on something. I think Pope Leo would say that the journey into the heart of nonviolence is our calling. Of course, if we live with other people, we get a chance to test that all the time. I'm married. I have a high school daughter in junior high school. And so I get to learn about nonviolence all the time. But really, it's going into the heart of it now. I don't think we get through the 21st century if we haven't really taken Jesus's gospel nonviolence seriously. And that means each of us going as deeply as we can into what it means, all those pretty words that Pope Leo talks about, to be unarmed, to be disarming. That's unarmed from all the things that keep us armed, psychologically, politically, culturally, religiously, whatever. And then disarming. That's disarming of ourselves, but also of other people and other situations. And Leo himself, a couple of weeks ago, said, yeah, the heart of it is prayer. We got to go deeply into that. So, and then there are a lot of ways to learn about nonviolence, trainings and workshops and seminars and experiences like this. But I'm going with Merton here. We're going to go from what we already know to the unknown. And that includes in that little prayer room. Because it is God who's calling us into that unknown. God who is lamenting and weeping over what's been done with this sacred creation, and and calling on us to be in sync with that creation and with the power of active, creative, liberating, transforming, nonviolent change that each of us has in our hearts.
Sister Janet May, I believe you had your hand up. Would you care to unmute yourself and ask a question?
Well, I keep having new insights all the time, so I'm in a different place right now than I was with my question. But I keep thinking that our approach to every day could be a pilgrimage. I mean, like, to anytime we reflect on what has happened today and how has that changed me. You know, it's I remember taking students to mission trips in Honduras. And one thing we did every night is we had what we call theological reflection. But where did we meet God today? Or what impacted you today? And in a sense, that's that reflection process is something each of us can do every day. If we do kind of an examine or whatever through our day, like, what impacted me today that changed me? Because that's what pilgrimages do. Every retreat we go on, I could see as a pilgrimage. Like tonight could be a pilgrimage for us. Like, what really struck us? I mean, I got all kinds of memories that came to me. And I think I know I don't reflect enough on what I'm experiencing and try to articulate it. So it's reminding me to do that daily.
Thank you so
Life
much.
is a pilgrimage.
Life is a pilgrimage. Life is a pilgrimage. And, you know, when I was taking 18 and 19-year-old students to Assisi in Rome, and we prepared with that reflection as critically important to all of it. And what the ritual of pilgrimage, that metaphor, provides for us is a container for seeing the significance of an experience and reflecting on that. And that offered my students and myself ways of not just showing up and clicking, oh, we saw this and we saw this, we saw this. And can I tell you, sister, that on the last trip, it was my last one because I just retired from DePaul. So the last one was in March. And my coworker, because I did this with a staff professional at DePaul, was wandering around Assisi and ran into our whole group, and they had formed a circle. And she said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, we're doing our daily reflection." And she was blown away that without our prompting, they had formed a circle and they were reflecting on one or two or three experiences from the day together, turning to a neighbor and sharing more, and then coming back to the large group. And that had taken somehow, because every day we did reflection morning and the evening, but they had found the value of it. Exactly what you're saying. Their life was richer now because they were bringing that reflection. Now, I know I'm in a group of people who reflect. I mean, I know some of you, and I just intuit that. And what I found was using that metaphor of a pilgrimage helped give a kind of framework. And then I would, it'd be interesting to ask, if the daily life is a pilgrimage, where's that arrival at the center? That unexpected, that thing that you had never thought before, or that person you had never met before. And then in your examine, you say, oh, wow. Thank you for that.
I think we have time for at least one more good question if someone has a burning issue that hasn't come forth yet.
Ken, here's a question from chat. How can families or small groups create their own pilgrimages?
What a great question. I think the magic of pilgrimages, you just have to kind of introduce the idea. And at first it might seem strange to a family. What do you mean? We're going to Disneyland. Well, isn't this kind of a pilgrimage? Oh, and then you have to kind of explain it, or maybe it's after you get back from the Magic Kingdom that you kind of reflect on that. I think I've found that the journeys I've taken with my daughter and my spouse, they're just the greatest. And to think about what we learned through that process. So I'm not perfect at that, but I think it's really worth doing. And my spouse and I are thinking about creating like a weekend workshop where you would do this in more depth, perhaps. And maybe it'd be great to do that for a family. You'd have kids kicking and screaming. I don't want what? That's a weird sounding thing. But you know what? I think we get to the end of our life and we realize, as Janet said, Sister Janet, it's been a pilgrimage all the way. And the more we can kind of get in touch with that. The thing I like about the metaphor, or the not just the metaphor, but the practice, it doesn't have to be out of a particular religious tradition. It doesn't have to be out of a particular politics. You don't have to be an introvert or an extrovert. You can use, it's wide open. So I told you that I sent my students, I said, find a place to go. I did this a million times in all these classes. This one student went back to the KFC, the Kentucky Fried Chicken they had worked in high school, and it had been a hellacious experience. It had been actually fairly traumatic, and decided to go and just look through the windows. And it was healing and transforming. So this is applicable in so many of your ministries, so many of the things that you do as a community. You can think of and say, oh, if I think about it as reflecting on this journey I've been part of, the meaning that I've had or lacked, and maybe going back and reflecting on it, something amazing can happen out of that process, even with families.
Dr. Butigan, thank you once again for such an amazing and rich presentation. And you've given us all so much to reflect upon. With the short amount of time that we do have left before we start losing people, we want to offer a little time to some representatives of the Tri-State Network to describe these local pilgrimage options. So you're about to see some slides appear on your screen describing some local pilgrimages, and then a representative from the religious congregation or spirituality center involved with that pilgrimage will say a few brief words about it. So let's go ahead and begin with that.
Hi, my name is Marcia, and I'm with the Franciscan Peace Center, which is the Clinton Franciscans. And our 3 self-guided pilgrimages are the Clinton Community Garden self-guided tour, and the Eagle Point Park self-guided tour, as well as the Clinton, Iowa Riverfront self-guided tour. And they all have ecological meaning behind them, so I hope folks are able to come out.
I'm Sister Nancy Miller and a member of the Laudato Si Committee of the Sisters of St. Francis. And we're offering a pilgrimage of trees. We've planted multiple trees of various kinds. And it'll take place on Saturday, September 13th, only 10 days away, from 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock in the afternoon at Mount St. Francis on 3390 Windsor Avenue. And it's also sponsored by Shalom Spirituality Center. And we invite you to experience a nature pilgrimage on the beautiful Mount St. Francis campus. We will be on hard surfaces, but you'll be able to see the trees. So that we invite you to come, but also to register at Shalom Retreat Center, because in case of inclement weather, it will be held on a different day. So please consider a pilgrimage of trees.
Hello, I'm Leslie Schwarting from Prairie Woods, Franciscan Spirituality Center in Hiawatha, Iowa. That is a mouthful. And we invite you to join us on Sunday, September 28th. It's a Sunday afternoon pilgrimage on the land at Prairie Woods. Here we will be talking about exactly what Sister Janet May talked about, and how we can be integrating and thinking about our life as a pilgrimage, and where we can see the holy in and through everything and every day. So we invite you to join us for a lovely Sunday afternoon on the land.
Lori, you're muted.
Lori. Yeah, Lori. Here.
Thank you. Hi, Lauren Freudenberg with the Prayer Retreat in Wheatland, and I invite you to come out every Monday and Tuesday in September. We have 100 acres of serene prairie forest and wetlands, and we have a labyrinth that we invite you to walk. It's this ancient sacred symbol. While walking the labyrinth, one enters into a mystery of the circle of life. We also have a 2-mile cosmic walk. It's a nature trail with 22 stone markers that tell creation story taken from the book of Genesis and expanded with the insights of science. And the Way of the Cross invites you to meditate on the 14 stations of the cross under the sky and amidst the trees. It's a beautiful place for a pilgrimage.
Hi, I'm Wendy Liebert from Marywood Franciscan Spirituality Center in northeastern Wisconsin. We're located about an hour and 15 or 20 minutes, maybe north of Wausau, Wisconsin on Highway 51. We're located right on the shores of Trout Lake in Vilas County, and that gives us a wonderful opportunity for a pilgrimage by kayak. This will be happening this coming Saturday, the 6th of September at 7:30 in the morning, when it's going to be 40-some degrees outside. We should be out on the water until between 10 and 10:30 in the morning. A very special person, one of our favorite kayak enthusiasts in the Northwoods, her name is Marianne Smers, will be leading this kayak retreat out on Trout Lake. We ask that if you would please contact us by email between now and Friday. That would be helpful in our preparation. So if you want to register, please email us at marywood.center@gmail.com.
So there you have it. And that is all the time that we have for this evening. On behalf of everyone involved with the Tri-State Network, I want to thank Dr. Butigan once again, and thank all of you who participated in this Zoom event. We encourage each of you to join one of these pilgrimage opportunities if it happens to be near you, or to create one for yourself, doing whatever feels best for you to renew your relationship with God, others, and creation through your prayerful actions. Hopefully this evening's presentation gave you some valuable ideas on the topic. Please remain alert for future Zoom programs arranged through the Tri-State Network, and may God bless you richly as you journey through the season of creation and this Jubilee year of hope. Good night to all.